Here's the number nobody put in the benchmark report. $122,000. That is the median net worth of an American household at age 40, according to the Federal Reserve's 2022 survey of consumer finances, the most comprehensive wealth study conducted in the United States. Not $800,000, not even $300,000, $122,000. And the moment you understand what that number actually means, your entire relationship with your own financial progress is going to shift in a direction you were not expecting. Here is why that number is dangerous. Not because it's low, but because the financial media, the retirement planning industry, and the personal finance content ecosystem that generates billions of dollars in advisory fees and product commissions has spent 2 decades ensuring that you never look at this number. They show you the aspirational benchmarks. They show you the fidelity guideline that says you should have 3 times your annual salary saved by age 40. They show you the charts of what $1 million does over 30 years. What they do not show you is where the median American household actually stands, because showing you the real benchmark would destroy the anxiety that drives engagement, product purchases, and subscription conversions. The financial media survives on your insecurity, and your insecurity is manufactured by hiding the number that would make most people feel significantly better about their actual position. Let me put real data on this before I go anywhere else. The Federal Reserve's survey of consumer finances, published every 3 years since 1983, shows the following. Median net worth for households under age 35 is approximately $39,000. For households aged 35 to 44, it sits at approximately $135,000. For 45 to 54, approximately $247,000. These are not averages, which are pulled dramatically upward by the ultra-wealthy. These are median figures, meaning exactly half of all American households in each age bracket have less. Half. If you are 42 years old with $200,000 in combined assets, and you have been running your personal finance calculations against a fidelity benchmark that says you should have $300,000, you have been measuring yourself against a target that only the top third of your age cohort actually hits. You are not behind the average. You are ahead of half the country. And nobody showed you that chart. Now, I want you to hold that frustration for a moment, because I need to introduce an analogy before we get to the numbers that are going to reorganize how you think about all of this. Think about a race where the starting gun fires and every runner is told the finish line is at mile 10. They train for 10 miles. They pace for 10 miles. They manage their energy for 10 miles. Halfway through the race, the officials quietly move the finish line to mile 15 without making any announcement. The runners who were ahead at mile 10 suddenly feel like they are failing. They are not failing. They are running the right race with the wrong map. The finish line got moved and nobody updated the signs. That is exactly what happened to the net worth benchmarks dominating personal finance content today. The rules designed for a world where a pension covered 40% of retirement income, where Social Security was fully funded, where healthcare was a fraction of its current cost, and where housing consumed roughly a third of household income are being applied without modification to a world where pensions cover virtually nobody. Where Social Security's own actuaries project a trust fund depletion by approximately 2033, according to the most recent trustees report, where healthcare premiums for a family of 4 average over $23,000 annually, according to the 2024 Kaiser Family Foundation Employer Health Benefits Survey, and where housing costs have risen to consume 51% of median household income in 2025, up from 33% in 2000 according to the National Association of Realtors. The finish line moved. You are running further than any prior generation ran, and the only benchmarks you can find online were designed for the original course. I want you to meet someone before I go any further, because abstract numbers are easy to dismiss, and a real situation is harder to ignore. Her name is Renata. She is 44 years old. She lives in Atlanta, Georgia. She earns $87,000 a year as a senior project manager at a mid-sized logistics company, a salary she worked 11 years to reach from a starting position at $38,000 right after finishing her degree. She has been investing since age 31 with no contribution gaps. Her 401k balance today is $148,000. She owns a condo with $67,000 in equity. She has no credit card debt. She maintains a small emergency fund covering roughly 3 months of expenses. Her combined net worth sits at approximately $229,000. By the Federal Reserve data, she is in approximately the 64th percentile for her age bracket, better than nearly 2/3 of all American households her age, and Renata feels like she has failed. She checks her balance every quarter. She reads personal finance content regularly. She has seen the projections that say she needs somewhere between 1.2 million and 1.8 million to retire comfortably. She runs the math forward on her current trajectory, and the number at 65 feels inadequate. She has started seriously researching rental properties. She has opened a brokerage account outside her 401k, where she has been buying individual stocks she reads about on financial subreddits. She is not making a math error, she is making a diagnosis error, and the diagnosis error is going to cost her more than she realizes if it runs uncorrected for another 5 years. Here is the thing about Renata's situation that the financial industry will never tell her directly. She is not in a savings problem. She is in a perception problem. The anxiety driving her into rental properties and stock picking forums is not generated by her actual financial position. It is generated by a systematic comparison between her real balance and a benchmark calibrated for a different era, a different cost structure, and a different macroeconomic reality. And that comparison was manufactured for her by an industry that profits directly from her anxiety. A calm, confident Renata who understands that she is in the 64th percentile of her age bracket and is building toward a legitimate late accumulation acceleration does not buy premium investment newsletters. She does not sign up for actively managed funds charging 1.2% expense ratios. She does not pay a financial advisor 1% annually to rebalance a portfolio she could leave alone for free. Her clarity is their revenue problem, so her clarity is the information they actively suppress. I am going to come back to Renata, but first let me explain why the 4 signs the title promised are structured the way they are, because this video is not going to tell you that you are doing great as a feel-good exercise. It is going to show you exactly where you are in the actual distribution of American wealth, and then show you precisely why the decisions most people make when they perceive a gap are the exact decisions that make the gap permanent rather than close it. Here is a structural observation that explains why this problem is so consistent and so predictable. Your optimal strategy, the one with the highest historical probability of reaching a comfortable retirement, is to contribute a meaningful fixed amount every month to a low-cost index fund and not touch it for 25 years. That strategy requires no financial media, no quarterly market analysis, no fund comparison tools, no premium newsletter, no advisor dashboard, no trading platform. No commentary on Federal Reserve policy, absolutely none of it. Your silence is their bankruptcy, which is why every piece of content produced by entities with financial products to sell is structurally designed to create the impression that the optimal strategy is more complex, more dependent on expertise, more in need of active management than it actually is. The noise is not neutral, the noise is a product. There is a specific mechanism that behavioral finance calls the complexity premium. People systematically assign higher perceived value to financial products and strategies that appear more complex, regardless of whether that complexity produces better outcomes. Meir Statman, professor of finance at Santa Clara University and one of the foundational researchers in behavioral finance, documented this pattern across multiple studies, showing that investors consistently rate complex financial instruments as more valuable than simple ones even when shown identical return data. The industry knows this. It is not an accident that actively managed funds have more prospectus pages than index funds. Complexity is the packaging. The product inside the packaging consistently underperforms, and the most powerful thing you can do right now is learn to read the packaging. The 4 signs I'm going to walk you through are not about whether you drive a nice car or take expensive vacations or earn a 6-figure income. They are about the structural mechanics of your financial position, mechanics that are invisible to most people because they were never taught them, mechanics that the financial industry is not incentivized to explain clearly. And when you see them in order, something I have observed repeatedly with people who have gone through this analysis, the frustration that was directed inward at your own choices, your own discipline, your own intelligence, redirects outward to where it actually belongs, at the system that hid the signs from you in the first place. We are going to start with the sign that is most counterintuitive, the one that almost everyone misreads as a warning signal when it is actually the strongest positive indicator in the entire framework. It involves a specific ratio, a number your account generates every single month that almost nobody calculates. And when you run this calculation on your own balance tonight, it is going to permanently change how you read every future account statement for the rest of your investing life. I call it the phase shift ratio. And before I give you the number, I need to explain the machine it measures, because the machine is the thing most financial content skips entirely. They show you the destination. They never show you the engine. Think about what compound interest actually looks like from the inside at different stages of the journey. Not the marketing brochure version with the hockey stick chart. The real version. The one that feels like almost nothing for the first decade and then feels like a completely different financial life somewhere in year 14 or 15. That split, the moment when the math transitions from phase 1 to phase 2, from manual labor to self-sustaining momentum, is the most important event in a long-term investor's journey, and almost nobody knows exactly when it happens for them. They are sitting inside it without realizing the shift has begun, or they are approaching it and they bail out 3 years early because the phase 1 numbers feel too slow. Both of those mistakes are catastrophically expensive, and both of them are made in perfect logical good faith by people who simply were never shown the mechanics of the transition. That is what we are going to fix right now. 4 signs your net worth is far above 99% of people. Shocking market stats. The phase shift ratio is calculated in exactly 12 seconds. Take the return portion from your last monthly investment statement, the dollar amount your account gained from market performance only, not what you contributed that month, and divide it by your monthly contribution. If the result is below 0.30, you are in phase 1. Every dollar of growth still requires you to physically show up and deposit it. If the result sits between 0.30 and 0.70, you are in the transition zone. The machine is warming up. The momentum is building in a way that will become visible in your statements over the next 3 to 5 years. If the result is above 0.70, your accumulated capital is beginning to generate returns that rival your own monthly labor. And if that ratio has crossed 1.0, if your monthly market return already exceeds your monthly contribution, the second employee is now outworking you. Being above 0.50 in your 40s places you structurally ahead of the majority of American investors in your bracket. Not because the number is dramatic, because most people at this stage are still below 0.20 and have no idea that the measurement even exists. This ratio is not taught anywhere in standard financial content, and the reason it is not taught is the same reason the percentile data is never prominently displayed in any major financial institution's marketing materials. Understanding this ratio makes you feel correctly positioned, and a correctly positioned investor does not need to buy anything. Let me give you the concrete numbers that prove why the ratio matters more than your raw balance. All of these calculations use a 7% annual return, monthly compounding. I am using 7% rather than the S&P 500's historical 10% average, not because 10% is unrealistic. Robert Shiller's dataset at Yale confirms the century-long figure, but because 7% adjusts for inflation and produces projections grounded in real purchasing power rather than nominal numbers that look impressive but dissolve in the grocery store. Investor A has $80,000 saved at age 38, contributes $500 per month. At 65, after 27 years, her balance is approximately $190,000. Her phase shift ratio at 38 is roughly 0.09, deep in phase 1, exactly where she should expect to be. Investor B has $180,000 saved at age 38, same $500 monthly contribution. At 65, her balance is approximately $140,000. Her ratio at 38 is already 0.21, climbing toward the transition zone. Investor C has $250,000 saved at age 38, still $500 per month. At 65, her balance is approximately $250,000. Her ratio at 38 is 0.29. She is at the edge of the transition, approaching the point where accumulated capital begins doing the heavy lifting without her prompting it. The contribution is constant, the time frame is constant, the return rate is constant. The only variable is the starting balance, and the 27-year terminal result moves from $119 million to $2. $15 million, a difference of nearly $1 million driven entirely by how much capital is already in the machine at the start of the measurement window. Sign number 1, stated directly. If your phase shift ratio is above 0.30 and you are under 50, you are in a structural position that the majority of American investors never reach. Most people exit the system before this happens. They bail at 0.12 or 0.15 because the statements look unimpressive and the benchmarks have been calibrated to make 0. 12 feel like failure. It is not failure. It is phase 1 functioning exactly as designed. But the investors who understand this stay. The ones who do not leave. And they always leave right before the machine changes speed. Sign number 2 requires you to temporarily abandon the way you currently think about market corrections. Most people treat a significant drawdown as evidence that the strategy is broken. A 20% decline feels like a 20% failure. The fear is rational. The conclusion is exactly backward. Dalbar, the financial analytics firm publishing their quantitative analysis of investor behavior since 1994, measures this damage directly. Over the 20-year period ending in 2023, the S&P 500 returned approximately 10.2% annually. The average equity fund investor returned approximately 6.8% annually. That 3.4 percentage point gap is not fees. It is not inflation. It is the behavioral cost of treating corrections as confirmation that the strategy is broken, going to cash at the bottom, and re-entering after the recovery is already priced in. Here is what 3.4 points means in real dollar terms. $200,000 at 10. 2% for 20 years grows to approximately $1,270,000. The same $200,000 at 6.8% for 20 years grows to approximately $761,000. The behavioral tax, the measurable cost of making emotionally reasonable decisions on perfectly functional index funds, is $609,000 on a $200,000 base. Not lost to fraud, not lost to a bad pick. Lost to the gap between what the market returned and what a frightened investor actually captured. Sign number 2, if you have held your positions through at least one meaningful market decline without selling, you are structurally ahead of the majority of invested Americans. The Dalbar data is not measuring a small edge case. It is measuring the dominant behavior across millions of accounts and 30 consecutive years of data. Now I need to name the real problem, because this is the plot twist buried in everything I have just shown you. You think the problem is that your net worth is not high enough. You think the problem is that your return rate needs optimization. You think the problem is that you have not found the right strategy yet. The diagnosis is wrong. The actual problem is not your position. The actual problem is your benchmark. The benchmark you are measuring against was designed by an industry that profits from the anxiety that comparison produces. When Fidelity publishes a guideline saying you need 3 times your salary saved by age 40, they are not acting as a neutral public service. They are an asset management company with over $12 trillion in assets under management, whose revenue is a direct function of how urgently you feel the gap between your balance and their number. The benchmark is a product. The anxiety it generates is the delivery mechanism, and understanding that reframes every financial decision you make from this point forward. Let me bring Renata back here because her story has a layer I have not shown you yet. Renata at 44, $229,000 in net worth, 64th percentile for her age group, feeling behind. She opened that outside brokerage account 6 months ago, 12 to 15 trades since then. She put $30,200 into a biotech company she found on a financial subreddit. The position is down 34%. She has not sold it because selling would make the loss real. Meanwhile, her 401k that she barely looks at earned approximately 11.3% last year because it sits in a Vanguard target date fund with a 0.15% expense ratio. The exciting account is down 34%. The boring account is up 11%. And Renata is spending cognitive energy, emotional energy, and actual transaction fees on the wrong account. That is not a character flaw. That is a predictable consequence of benchmarks calibrated to produce exactly that behavior. Sign number 3, if your primary investment vehicle is a low-cost index fund and you have not significantly altered your allocation in the past 2 years, you are in the structural minority of American investors. Morningstar's 2024 fund fee study found the average expense ratio for an actively managed U.S. equity mutual fund is approximately 1.0%, with many running between 1.2% and 1.5%. Add a standard 1% advisory fee, and your total annual cost approaches 2% of your portfolio, regardless of market performance. What 2% costs in practice over 25 years? $200,000 at net 8%, and because a 2% fee on a 10% gross return leaves you with 8% net, it grows to approximately $1,370,000. The same $200,000 at net 9.97%, and because a Vanguard index fund at 0.03% expense ratio effectively keeps the full historical return, grows to approximately $1,848,000. That fee structure costs $478,000 on a $200,000 base. Your second employee generated that $478,000. and then a portion of his output was redirected to fund managers who, according to S&P's SPIVA scorecard published every 6 months since 2002, underperformed their benchmark index in more than 85% of cases over any 15-year rolling period. More than 85%. The data is public. The fees continue because most investors never look at the expense ratio column because nobody showed them it existed. Because the enrollment form lists fund names and star ratings and buries the expense ratio behind a separate click that most people during HR onboarding simply never make. One more sign remains, and it is the one that connects everything I have shown you to 3 specific actions you can take before the end of this week. Before I get there, hold this. The most expensive financial mistake most people make is not a bad stock pick. It is not a missed contribution. It is not even the fee drag, as significant as that is. The most expensive mistake is spending the years between 38 and 48 in a misdiagnosed state, pursuing solutions to a problem that does not exist, while the actual transition from phase 1 to phase 2 quietly builds in the background of the account they pay the least attention to. Renata's boring 401k is doing exactly what it needs to do. Her exciting outside account is undermining it. The correction is not complicated. But it requires seeing the 4th sign clearly, because that sign reveals whether the machine you have been feeding for years is pointed in the right direction, or whether a single structural decision made without full information is quietly redirecting your second employee's paycheck to someone else every single year without your awareness or your permission. 4 signs your net worth is far above 99% of people. Shocking market stats. Sign number 4 is the one that contains the most expensive invisible number in your entire financial picture. And the number is not in your account balance. It is not in your return rate. It is in a column on your retirement account statement that most people have genuinely never read because it does not appear on the summary screen. It appears only when you click into the fund detail. It is called the tax drag coefficient, and it works in conjunction with your account structure to either amplify or quietly erode every percentage point of return your second employee generates. Here is the structural reality that most financial content never explains clearly. Not all accounts are equal in what they let you keep. $1 earned inside a Roth account and $1 earned inside a traditional taxable brokerage account are not the same dollar. They have the same face value today. In 25 years, when your second employee has been compounding that dollar at 7% annually, the Roth dollar is entirely yours. The taxable dollar has been paying an annual tax on dividends and realized gains the entire time, reducing your effective return by anywhere from 0.5% to 1.5% per year, depending on your tax bracket and your fund's turnover ratio. Let me put a specific number on what that means over Renata's actual timeline. Renata is 44. She has 21 years until 65. Her 401k balance of $148,000 sits in a traditional pre-tax account, which means every dollar of that balance will be taxed as ordinary income at withdrawal if her balance reaches $1. $1 million at 65, and she begins required minimum distributions that push her into the 22% federal tax bracket, which is entirely realistic at that balance level. She loses approximately $242,000 in federal taxes on the back end. $242,000 is not a penalty for doing something wrong. It is the consequence of a structural account decision made at age 31 at her first job enrollment without anyone walking her through what a Roth versus traditional designation actually means across a 25-year compounding window. Nobody explained it during onboarding. The HR representative pointed at a fund name. She clicked accept. The decision that will cost her $242,000 took less than 4 minutes. Sign number 4. If you have deliberately evaluated your account structure, Roth versus traditional, tax-advantaged versus taxable brokerage, and you have positioned your highest growth assets inside the account type that minimizes your lifetime tax exposure, you are in a sophisticated minority of American investors. Vanguard's 2025 research on tax-efficient investing found that investors who actively manage account location and asset placement retain an average of 0.5% to 0. 75% more in annual after-tax return compared to investors who ignore account structure entirely. Over 25 years on a $200,000 base, that additional 0.5% compounds to approximately $140,000 in extra retirement wealth from a decision made in 15 minutes with a plan administrator, not from a single additional dollar of contribution. Now here's what I have been building towards since the opening of this video and why the sequence of the 4 signs matters more than any individual sign in isolation. The financial industry presents your net worth journey as a linear race toward a single number. The marketing benchmarks give you a finish line. The anxiety they generate about your current position relative to that finish line drives the behavior that benefits them. The 4 signs I have just walked you through are not about whether you are close to the finish line. They are about whether the machine you have built is structurally sound, correctly positioned, and operating at full efficiency. And here is the reality that the data confirms repeatedly across the Federal Reserve's Wealth Survey, the Dalbar Behavioral Research, the Morningstar Fees Study, and the SPIVA Scorecard. A structurally sound machine at $200,000 with a phase shift ratio above 0. 30, with no history of panic selling, with a blended expense ratio below 0.5%, and with deliberate account structure positioning will reach outcomes in 25 years that a structurally compromised machine at $300,000 will never achieve. The finish line is not a number. The finish line is a machine that is properly built and left alone to run. 3 specific actions, not generic recommendations, not things that require extraordinary discipline or dramatic lifestyle change. 3 decisions that can be executed this week, each of which compounds in a direction the financial industry would prefer you never calculated. Action 1. Calculate your actual phase shift ratio tonight using your most recent account statement and write the number down, not in a note app that you will forget exists, on paper with a date. Then open a compound interest calculator. Any free online version will do, and run a 25-year projection on your current balance at 7% annual return monthly compounding with your current monthly contribution. Write down the terminal number. Then increase your monthly contribution by $100 in the same projection and write down that terminal number. The difference between those 2 numbers is the calculable value of a $100 per month increase made this week versus the same increase made 5 years from now. That difference is almost always larger than people expect because the early years carry 7 times the compounding power of the late years. Every month at a contribution level below your actual capacity is not a neutral delay. It is a sacrifice of your highest value compounding dollars. The ones with the longest runway. The ones that will compound for 25 years instead of 5. This calculation takes 15 minutes. The decision it supports takes 1 login. Action 2. Log into every investment account you own and find the expense ratio for every fund you hold. If you cannot find it on the summary screen, click into the fund detail page. It will be there. Write down the blended expense ratio across all holdings. If any individual fund shows a ratio above 0.5%, open the investment options list within the same plan and search for the lowest cost index fund available that provides comparable market exposure. In most employer-sponsored plans, this option exists and is accessible without speaking to anyone. You click the fund name, you click reallocate, you confirm. The entire decision takes approximately 12 minutes. If your blended expense ratio drops by even 0.75 percentage points as a result of this decision, the compounding benefit over 25 years on a $150,000 portfolio is approximately $210,000. $210,000 from 12 minutes of clicking inside an account you already own. The financial industry does not publicize this calculation. The math behind it is not complicated. It simply benefits you rather than them. Action 3. Pre-decide your next income event right now before the money exists. When is your next raise, bonus, tax refund, or loan payoff realistically arriving? Write the approximate date. Write the expected dollar amount. Write the specific percentage of that amount you will redirect to investments the moment it lands. Make this decision in writing today while you are in an analytical frame of mind and there is no actual cash in your hand. The decision made right now in the abstract is the one that executes correctly. The decision made in the moment while holding new money and standing adjacent to a home renovation quote or a car dealer's lot almost never goes to investments. Behavioral Finance Research by Richard Thaler and Shlomo Benartzi, published in their foundational 2004 paper on the Save More Tomorrow program in the Journal of Political Economy, demonstrated that pre-commitment to future savings increases, reduces the psychological friction of contribution growth to near zero, because the loss is never felt in the present. The money is redirected before lifestyle registers that it exists. The lifestyle ratchet, the mechanism that silently absorbs every income increase within 90 days of arrival, cannot click forward on money that has already been automatically redirected. Architecture eliminates the need for willpower. Design the system correctly once and the correct decision runs automatically every time. Now let me close Renata's story because I told you I would, and because how her situation resolves is more instructive than how it began. Renata did not sell the biotech position, she held it and it recovered partially. She is still down on that account by about 18% net of the partial recovery, but she made 3 decisions in the week after she ran her own phase shift ratio calculation. First, she closed the outside brokerage account and moved the remaining balance into her existing 401k as an additional contribution, consolidating everything into the low-cost index fund that had been quietly earning 11% while she was distracted by the noise. Second, she logged into her 401k and moved from a target date 2040 fund with a 0.15% expense ratio into a Vanguard total stock market index fund with a 0. A 3% expense ratio, a seemingly minor change that over her remaining 21 years compounds to approximately $38,000 in additional retirement wealth from a 12-minute reallocation decision. Third, she found out her car loan ends in 7 months. She wrote the payoff date on a post-it note on her monitor and wrote the number $350 next to it. That is the amount she has already decided to redirect to her 401k the month the final payment clears, not when she gets around to it, that month. Before the lifestyle discovers the freed cash flow and quietly claims it, Renata's revised projection at 65 is approximately $1,380,000 from retirement accounts alone, with the home equity as a secondary buffer and Social Security as supplemental income on top of that. She is not going to retire at 55. She may not retire before 65. But she is looking at a legitimate retirement on an $87,000 income without any inheritance, without any windfall, without a single stock pick, and without any advisor charging her 1% to rebalance a portfolio that was already performing better left alone. She got there by seeing 4 signs clearly that had been hidden from her by an industry that profits from the anxiety produced by hiding them. That is the entirety of the mechanism. Here is the temporal cost of not acting on what you have just learned. $1 invested today in your 40s at 7% annually doubles approximately every 10 years. $1 invested at 55 doubles once before a typical retirement age. The same dollar, the same fund, the same return rate. The variable is when you redirected it. Every month you spend in a misdiagnosed state, chasing returns on the wrong account, paying unnecessary fees on the right one, comparing your phase 1 balance to a benchmark designed to manufacture your insecurity, is a month where your highest value compounding dollars are either being spent on noise or are sitting at the wrong contribution level collecting dust. The system is not complicated. The math is not controversial. The only question is whether you are running it at full efficiency or whether a series of decisions made without full information years ago are quietly redirecting your second employee's output to someone else. The 4 signs tell you exactly where the leak is. The 3 actions seal it, and the machine you have already built, the one that has been running in the background while you wondered if it was working, is almost certainly further along than the